Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Writers Drinking Whiskey Open Bar, the show where we talk unironically about truth and beauty and ironically about everything else. I am your host that always overserves, so you should probably lose those keys, William R. Hincy. And joining me tonight, I got a really phenomenal panel. John McElroy, Dario Terriello, Michael Kozlowski. Everybody, welcome to the bar.
Thank you, Bill.
Oh, William.
Awesome. And so I'll have the full description in the bios here. So if you want to find any of the work, websites, anything, just click that little box. If I can find the thing, I'm not a seasoned YouTuber yet. But if you want to find anything there, it'll be there for you. But I have a fun game to introduce everyone today. And I don't know, none of us have maybe ever used the dating apps, but this is based on a dating app. And this is going to be if you were doing a dating app based on your reading preferences.
Oh, boy.
Reading preferences here. What are your turn-offs, turn-ons? So, and maybe Mac, we can start with you.
Oh, that's not fair. I've never been near a dating app. I'm a technological idiot. I literally don't have a single app. So how can I construct an answer to that? What are my hypocrisy is hypocrisy. Turn off. Turn on integrity.
Okay, so but it's writing themes. So reading themes turn on and turn offs.
Talking about if I were on a dating set. All right.
Yeah. This is the reading. Like you're dating authors right now. The authors. What are your turn-ons?
Okay. Yeah. Short stories. I write them. So I would love to, if I were on the writer's dating app, I would probably seek a short story writer because I have the attention span of a gerbil and I can't write a novel. So I'd humiliate myself with anyone else other than a short story writer. So that would be my turn on. Turn off. Writers that think they're better than me. No, that's terrible. I would just say I have no other answer. I have no answer. So just okay. I got one dating app.
Fair enough.
Delete that other
profile.
Stuff.
It's fine. Dario, let's switch over to you.
Yeah, this is live, folks. That was scary.
That's scary.
I'm glad I wasn't first. Wow. Well, turn-ons, a few and far between. I need a writer who makes me care about their characters. That's all I want, and a good story where something actually happens. Huge range of people I like. I'll hold up John le Carre and Mark Twain, Edgar Allan Poe, science fiction writer C.J. Cherryh, who is extraordinary. Turn-offs are most of what's published. Anything that feels remotely formulaic, anything that doesn't make me give a damn about the characters, and pretty much anything by Hemingway. I'm a style junkie.
Hey, William, can you scrub my part two so I can build on what my friend here just said because I liked it? So scrub the other nonsense, but I want to build on what he said. And that is, I hate celebrity / positional publishing. In other words, I won't name names, but you do something scandalously outrageous in politics or in sports or in entertainment, and you suddenly get $1 million advance and make $18 trillion writing nonsense. That's my turnoff. Thank you for the prompt.
Yeah, no problem. And I'm not going to scrub it. You're just going to pop in.
Oh, no, that's not fair.
No, it's fine. It's an open bar. This is what happens at a bar. Everyone riffs off of each other. There you go.
We're all mid-listers.
That's hilarious. Awesome. So let's go to you, Mike.
All right, I'll try to do it in like a short dating app sort of version, right? So I'll go turn-ons are Stephen King, horror in general, short stories, and documentaries or biographies, rather, particularly rock and roll biographies. Turn-offs, I would agree with the formulaic. Glittery vampires. What else do trying to think. I'll read just about anything. So I really on board with Mac and the whole celebrity version of, that whole billion-dollar contract for existing, Kardashian fame sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think that's probably good.
Yeah. That's hilarious. What I love about this so far is that we've equated writing a book to trillions and billions so far.
Right. Well, because we think everybody else gets trillions and billions, and we're very bitter that we're not getting trillions and billions. I did get a $370 or $75 check today, so I was pretty excited about that.
Exactly. Yeah, the children out there are like, what? Why am I making this money? It's like, unless you're like King or Harry Potter lady, you're not making
right.
billions and trillions. But awesome.
We
Thanks for that,
settle
guys.
for millions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'd settle for like a made-for-TV movie,
Right.
kind of contract from it.
Yeah, just enough that I don't have to work the job that pays me now would be excellent.
That's the dream now, right? You just hope to make enough that you don't have to have a real job.
Right. Could just stay, live my lavish lifestyle that I have going without
So,
real.
so William, as you know, I bumped into this stuff kind of after retirement. And every once in a while, I'm fool enough to tell boy, I wish I'd started this like 30 years ago. My wife looks at me and says, you don't know how happy I am. You didn't. She says, I like living in a house and eating. There it is.
Probably much
children.
better for your marriage.
The life of a writer.
So thanks for that, guys. Let's go ahead then, and we'll get into our first question here. One of my favorite topics to get into on this show is writing rules. I like my air quotes. I like to do them very aggressively too. The writing rules, the great said debate, and so I've heard this both ends of the spectrum here. So I'm going to present it to the panel. So, true or false, you should never use any other word to describe dialogue, right? It's just you use said or you use nothing, and you absolutely do not use an adverb because the way to hell is paved via adverbs, according to Mr. King. So you will not use an adverb to describe that said. What say you, panel? And then maybe we'll start opposite direction this time because I'm going by how it looks on my screen. Let's start with you this time, Mike.
All right, so I'll give that said and asked are both the same because
Sure. Yeah, fair enough.
I would say with most things it's a balance, right? And I'd also say King does not follow that rule at all. So as most people who make rules do not follow their own rules. But I think it's a balance. You can certainly overuse the adverbs or she said, miserably or whatever, she groaned. But then sometimes it's important to inflect, without changing your sentence. You might want to, especially something like sarcasm. Oh, that's great. If you just said that's great, she said, okay, she thinks it's great. But if it might be she's great, that's great. She groaned, right? Mm-hmm. So
sure.
Sometimes I think it's necessary, but if you get a whole paragraph of adverbs and it would drive you nuts, right? So.
Yeah. Right. That's hilarious that you said that because it's one of the things that it always reminds me of is that every rule that everyone's going to present, you will be able to find bestsellers, award winners, and your favorite authors that will break that at times.
Yeah.
So nothing's really a rule, maybe a guideline at best, but some people take these things very seriously. So I think that is an important distinction. I also think that, there's that idea that, I don't think it's an idea. I think there's truth to it, that you reveal a lot of character through dialogue, and you advance plot many times through the dialogue that's said. So it's carrying a lot of weight. It's carrying a lot of the information you're managing forward. So you want the dialogue to be kind of the golden piece. And so if you're using exclaimed and things a lot, it may be that the dialogue isn't up to snuff. So it may give you a hint.
Yes, I'd agree with that. The more and I'll always use said as a default, right? That's usually the first, unless it just flows really cleanly that I should have something else. But always said, and then maybe I'll go back and look at that and see if it's right. But I agree with that. It forces you to make the dialogue better.
Right. Yeah. And I think some of the rules start like that. They're almost for like beginning writers, and then it's like, no, you break them. But I think that's partially the thing, is if the verb you're using to describe the speech is doing the work, that's probably bad. I don't think there's any. To me, words are tools. You use the right one for the job. But it's sometimes said's the right one. Sometimes groaned, like you said, that might be another right one. So. Dario, you wanna chime in?
Yeah, you may have to stop me on your questions today because they're good ones, and you know that I'm a libertarian when it comes to rules. It's an unfortunate outgrowth of the internet that with all the writing bloggers and groups, that people get very black and white on this stuff. And my answer to most writing rule questions is it depends. And I really agree with what Michael said and what you said about dialogue, quality of dialogue. So generally said is really transparent, and I'll use it by default. Asked and replied, yeah, sometimes, not so much. Anything fancy like he ejaculated, which used to be a very common one in 19th century fiction, we try and avoid.
Before erotica got really big. We used that a lot. And then the meaning just went nuts from there.
It was big in Victorian fiction.
They were so repressed, of course.
I maybe occasionally suggested or commented in place of said, but keep it to once or twice in a book, for God's sake. Elmore Leonard was the real Nazi on this. He always used said. I think it was Leonard. And you had two questions in one. The adverb one, well, they're related. Exactly what Michael said. I'm a big fan of King's too. He uses adverbs, yes. Some writers who are very successful use adverbs by the bucketful, like J.K. Rowling, for instance, and dialogue tags and things like that. Bottom line is, unless you're trying to be a literary writer, it doesn't matter much as long as the reader is on board and stays on board. And I think, as Bill said, they're all tools. Parts of language and punctuation are all tools, and you use them when you need to. It's much more efficient if it's not apparent in the line of dialogue. It's much more efficient to say, she said softly, than to preface it or follow the dialogue by, her tone was soft. Sometimes it's just more efficient. Nobody cares. Readers don't care about this stuff.
Right. That's a brilliant point. I think that a lot. There's writer debates, and lots of writers are readers, but fair enough. But there's the I'm a writer reader, and versus just I read books because I enjoy it. The writer readers will be into he said and she said all the time. The other people, I don't think they care one iota. I mean, as long as they understand what's happening.
To that point, I think we talked about it actually on the show last time. I'm much more critical of writing reading, other people's writing, right? Because I write now, I enjoy reading so much less. I have so many more, do not finish books, right? Because I'm reading
I have trouble finding new books to read. I do a lot of rereading.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, really.
Which I used to think was weird. Like I would have said like rereading a book is really weird back in the, But then, as I thought about it, I'm like, there's 100 movies I'll watch every time they come on, and I'll watch it again, even though I know what's going to happen, and the reading, I'm much less likely to remember much of the book, right? I'll remember the very end, but so I reread more now than I ever did, but I would have said that was weird as hell before.
Sure.
You guys really nailed it on the set and ask. And I mean, I really have no authority or platform to disregard rules, but I probably do. And it's largely a function that I've kind of backed into writing, and I kind of religiously avoid kind of how-to books. I mean, I just try to kind of write on instinct, and I don't know whether it works. And I do recognize, and I think both of y'all said, said's kind of a default. But when I go back and redraft, SEDs tend to migrate, to groans and whispers and you name what. The asks tend to stay kind of asks. I don't fancy that around. But, I don't know. I agree with you guys. I don't think anyone really cares other than people that, maybe people who teach writing, and I think I trespass enormously on that rule, particularly on the set issue. Adverbs, I love them. Put them in there. I think I probably use them too often. What the heck?
Right.
Well, and I think fair enough. I think one of the things, if you're starting out, right, and I mean, I guess whatever, we're all trying to improve, right? I always look at it like I'm just trying to be the best writer I can be, right? So I'm just trying to maximize that. One of the things I think you can look at is, one is if you look at it, you don't always have to, there's quotes around it. You don't always have to say a person said it, because there's little marks around it all the time to say someone said it. So if you take that set away, it can actually be really interesting as how well does that dialogue stand on its own. So, and sometimes you can do this too much. And I think I've certainly probably done it occasionally too much, to where you don't, give the reader kind of a sign who's saying. And I try to be mindful of that, because the worst thing you can do is confuse somebody to where they don't know who's talking anymore. But it can be a real indication of if your dialogue is distinctive enough, if it's vital enough, right? There's always this, in the show Dario and I did, that'll air by the time this one comes out, it'll be out. We talked about show, don't tell. And there can be that, I want to show it, so a character's going to say it. And it may not be worth someone saying, right? And so if you take that set out and just leave it there, you may look at it and be like, I could just narrate what just happened here. This isn't worthy dialogue. And keep the dialogue to something that's punctuating a point or revealing character. I think of it a lot. Like what I say reveals a lot of my character. All of us, it really reveals a lot about us and what's happening. So I think if you take those out, it can be a good trick to see how well does your dialogue stand up. How well are you revealing the characters? Can you kind of see them apart, when they talk? That can be a little tricky. Like you gotta play that, because if you get too into it, you get too into the phonetic, into the dialect and all of that, it can be its own mess. So there's a balancing act to it. But it is an interesting exercise to go through.
I find I strike quite a lot of he said's or she said's when I'm editing. They're often unnecessary, especially in the middle of a paragraph. Every few, you're talking about script writing. That's the perfect example of dialogue. And yes, if the character voices are distinct enough, you need less tags. Otherwise, it is after about 4 exchanges, readers kind of lose it if the voices aren't so distinct. So you throw in a tag. But they're overdone quite often.
Bill, you may have been at this particular Short Story America conference. Do you remember that John Engel reading a story that he'd written? It was a very short story that had a poetic rhythm to it. It was a constant, he said, Baba, she said, he said, she said. It was so repetitive. It was magical. It was lyrical. I mean, it just was. I remember I went up to John afterward and I said that was just. It was spellbinding. I mean, short, simple sentences. It never broke. He said, she said. So there's a case where it just worked beautifully. Beautifully. I wish I could remember that short story's name, but it was breathtaking to listen to. So sometimes it works better reading, perhaps, a story to get that kind of rhythmic repetitiveness. Anyway, great writer, John Engel.
I'd say that to your point of not using the tags at all, I do that in my fiction writing regularly. Because for this very debate, like it's in my head, in the back of my head, that I'm using such too much. Should I not? So I'll challenge myself not to use a dialogue tag at all. Usually, then when I go back for my second draft, and I rarely write more than two, partially because I'm lazy. I'll then, as I'm reading it, then you see it, or I always have a first reader, like we talked about before, and they'll say I lost track of who was talking or whatever, and then you go, okay, I need a tag there. But yeah, that's a great exercise. I think everybody should do for dialogue.
Yeah, sure.
It also depends a little on. And this is getting a little kind of geeky, but it depends on formatting as well. I actually just finished an edit for someone today where the same character had paused between two lines of dialogue, and the author had given the new line a fresh paragraph without, and still used all the quotation marks.
Okay.
So.
Yeah.
That confused me right away. And, I said, put them on the same line, and or say, he paused and, he paused a moment then. So a lot of, at a kind of nuts and bolts level, some of it is simply to do with the way you've formatted the sequence of dialogue with gestures, and accompanying body language. Sometimes people format that a little weirdly. They'll have two characters plugged into the same paragraph with one talking, the other reacting, and then the same one talking again. That can get kind of confusing.
Well, and to format, I guess, your writing perspective as well, right, is, if you have a format, which I have had this in some of my books, where it's really one character kind of per chapter, right, and it's their perspective. Rarely do you then need the dialogue tag, because that's
you're talking
that person, right? So then you can just throw them all away,
Sure. Well, I'm glad we got there, because actually that was the other piece of this I wanted to talk about is there's I've heard them called different things, but kind of the action tags, the dialogue tags, to where instead of saying said, it's to get back to your point, Mike, when it was if it's sarcastic, right? And I wouldn't do this too often because rolling the eyes can get very old. I've had teenage daughters. Rolling the eyes gets super old. Okay, it's like I want everyone to know. But that can actually be something, right? Where they go, right. Janice rolled her eyes, and then you get that. Okay, that was there, right? So you can actually. What I try to look for is there an interesting action? Like I don't want everyone shaking their head all the time, but is there something organic that maybe that character would do?
Yeah, shrugged. Really he shrugged. Right.
Right.
Nodded.
I think I throw a lot of shrugs in. I just.
I think I do as well.
I think a lot of my characters are just shrugging through life. I don't know what.
I have to watch my noddings. They do that a lot. All these little gestures and I find it harder to get the gestures and the body language and the simply getting people up and down the stairs and into the car. I find that's more than half the effort of writing is just that background stuff. The connective tissue.
Interesting.
I think the last one we did, Dario, Matthew Kaye was on, and Matt had described that as blocking, right? It's like kind of the blocking and tackling. It's like when you have a play, there's blocking, and you cut stage left, cut stage right. And there is that actually would be a really interesting question for a future episode. Just how do you the blocking aspect of it? Like, how do you fit that in a natural way? Because sometimes you just need to move a character, right, and to get them to the bus stop, and that's where the interesting stuff happens. You don't want to spend an hour moving them to the bus stop if nothing happens interesting during that hour.
I think the people that do that well too, you really notice because they do it very succinctly. Usually,
right.
It's like 1 or 2 words, and you know exactly what that person did and how they moved and what they were looking at, what they were thinking, and I catch those every once in a while in a book, and with the critical eye now that unfortunately I have to read with, and you catch me and go, wow, that was amazing.
Sure.
William, it just occurred to me, and again, I write really short stories, as I said, and I say this sincerely, that I've never really done any formal kind of training in this. And a lot of time, I think I just kind of don't know the blocking and tackling to get people to get to where they need to go. So I do page breaks. I mean, that's
sure.
kind of my blocking and tackling. I guess it's kind of the poor man's block or tackle, because I've just kind of, let's get some space in there and put those little squiggles and then start afresh. And let that white space.
It's like a fade to black, right? Or
something like
that. Yeah.
No, I never thought about it that way, whether that's a legitimate, but it seems to get me off the structural issue of, well, they're there, and that's then. How do we get there? And it seems to work. I don't know.
That's the thing. If it works, it's okay. To hell with anybody's rules.
I love it. I love
whether
it.
it works and keeps the reader turning the page and not confused. You got it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Mac, you've mentioned a couple of times, you've said you don't have formal training. I don't have any kind of formal training
Really?
as a writer. I think most writers don't. The ones that do, you can almost always tell. And that's probably one of my, dislikes on my Bumble app is writers with formal training.
I keep going back. I keep trying to amend, my turnoffs. I'm going to add that one. Boy, I'm going to step on some toes, but that kind of academic.
Sure, it's a pompous.
You know what I'm trying to say.
So I'll step on toes
Pedantic,
for you, Matt.
pedantic.
It's the MFA program.
All right, you said it. I won.
There you go.
Yeah, and some of them are great.
Yes.
Some of them I adore, but there's a certain professors writing to other professors, MFA student writing to other MFA students, and it gets very pedantic and very
they're the
technical
people that
and
push these rules, right? That we're talking about. They're the ones that are going to call you out because you said too much. So, don't be apologetic, Mac. Particularly not in this group.
I'm just worried that we're going to get some midnight knockers tonight from the Association of Writing Professionals.
I live in Detroit. They won't even come to my house to be scared.
you're safe.
Cheers.
Yeah, very true. Well, that's true, right? There is the difference. Like I literally, my wife. My wife isn't going to watch this, so she's in the house. She may overhear it. I'm afraid she doesn't, because this drives her crazy. I walked away from school 3 classes from my bachelor's.
That's hilarious.
There's 2 reasons. One is it kind of amuses me that I walked away 3 classes away, and like had a great career and things. I was doing well, still doing well. There was no issue there, so it became less financially necessary. The bigger point was I really felt like it was making my writing worse. That every time I went into a class, because I had an old professor many, many moons ago, during my AA, that said, you kill to dissect. So it's like, I want to know Moby Dick, so I have to kill it to dissect it. You lose the magic. Like you've talked a few times, Mike, like you don't enjoy reading it so much, right? Because once you shoot the bird, if the bird's not as interesting anymore, it doesn't fly anymore. And you can dissect it and get to the parts that made it fly, but it doesn't fly. You don't get to witness it going. Like that's a huge difference between me, poisoning the eagle with DDT or whatever and looking at its dead body versus actually watching it like in the air. And there was a real part of that to where once I did that, I was publishing before, and then suddenly nothing was getting accepted. And I realized I hated all of my writing. And all of that I ended up throwing in the trash. Some of the stories I kept and just rewrote, and distilled down to like their point and tried to get to what's the art of it. I don't think art necessitates schooling.
So I was a art major, and so not writing, but fine art and graphic design, and almost the exact same story. I probably a semester short of of my bachelor's degree, and it was financial things too. I was had a whole other job going, but yeah, I quit because I was almost like selling out to get the grade. I had a few different professors who were like, and you learn what they liked, and it's like, okay, well, I guess this is what I'll make today because that's what they want to see. And I was like, man, I really hate doing this now. So it's like a mirror experience, other than that it wasn't writing, but.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Before we move on to the next question, anything else, Dario, Mac, anyone want to add to the conversation here?
A great conversation.
No, that was good.
Round number 2, author life. I like just hearing that. Like, love that we said round number 2. Writer's block. What is it, and how do you break down that wall? We started with Mike and Max. So Dario, let's start with you this time.
I've thought a lot about this, and the first thing I want to say is that it's not what most people think of. I think most writers, especially younger ones or newer ones, have this kind of notion that their muse has left them and they're on their own, and suddenly the magic's gone and the fairy dust isn't happening anymore. And I don't believe that model. As you know, Bill, I think our muse is our own subconscious, and that's always going to be there, and it's always feeding you stuff. But I think when we get blocked, there's always a real world reason. I'd say most of the time it's that, no, it's not that we're too busy. I'd say the number one reason is it's a message from your subconscious that you either have a character or plot problem. It's a red flag. And I think when you're stuck, you really need to look at whether you know your characters, whether you're portraying them the way they are, whether you've got a big plot issue that is causing you problems and you haven't realized it yet. But I think there's usually a writerly reason. Secondary or along with that is real life. Sometimes you're just fried. Sometimes the demands of family and kids and work are just too much, and you can't focus. But I think they're always nuts and bolt problems. I don't think they're magical or metaphysical ones. And I think you just have to dig into it. But the first place I always look is at my characters. It's usually a character trying to tell me something. I could say I've been suffering some block myself recently with trying to get a new novel. I know exactly why that is. It's because I edit for a living, and I do a lot of editing, and I have a few really, really good clients. I'm super self-critical. I was always, I always had trouble turning off the inner editor when I wrote anyway. But that's got even harder as I'm so used to to reading in analytical mode. So I have trouble turning off that inner editor. So that's another problem too, I think, sometimes, is that one's being too critical at way too early a stage, i.e. first draft. So that's my thinking on it. But I don't think there's anything supernatural going on.
Sure. Well, I tend to think of it, and I'm glad you brought that up, Dario. Thanks for the thoughtful analysis on that. That there's different kinds of block, right? There's kind of your intra-story block, which is I've come across a problem in this story and I feel blocked from that, right? Like maybe I could go off and write something else, but I feel very blocked with this novel or this short story, this play, screenplay, whatever it happens to be. I think there's real psychological block. And I think I have real trauma, real stress, real grief or something I'm dealing with that you need to deal with that before you can get in touch with your creative self again. That's a more serious one that I think is more, go talk to a therapist. Don't jump onto the Writers Drinking Whiskey program. It's like there's stuff going on. Like, and
you do it your way and I'll do it mine. Jeez.
And I think there's the general block, which you'll hear, and I think this is what people tend to use for writer's block. Probably the first and the second one a lot of times is just to where maybe you're healthy emotionally, psychologically, physically, but you just feel like you can't write. And I think some of those can be the placebo block, to where you've bought into the notion that there's a thing called writer's block, and you get the placebo effect from it, that you think, oh, this can happen. And then, just like the placebo can heal, it's been proven time and time to be able to heal, it can also damage. And I think sometimes you can get that damage if you believe in it, too much. So I think that is an important distinction, is what type are you dealing with? The psychological, I think you need a psychologist, you need a therapist of some sort. For our discussion here, the interest story, I think there's interesting ways to get out of that. We can talk through. I think the general block, even the placebo block, I think all of those, there's methods to get yourself, potentially out of it. So maybe we can mix up the order here instead of just going slavishly through how everyone appears on my screen. Let's go with you, Mike. What say you?
All right. I think.
Or what did you said?
I have no idea what that means. I have another. So anyway, this is why it's called Writers Drinking Whiskey. I think you guys nailed it. As far as I don't think of it as something metaphysical. Some muse has left you, like Dario said. It's I think your muse is within you. Outside of just general inspiration, somebody else can inspire you, but the idea of some mystical creature, I don't buy that. I think generally. Interstory, I'd say it's just sort of you hit a spot, right? I wouldn't even think of that as a block. For me, it's just I got a problem. I got to figure out where the story goes, and I'm a more of a pantser than I am a planner, so that happens all the time. For me, I'm 3 chapters in and go, where was I going? And then 3 chapters later, I go, man, I was a genius in chapter 1. So it's all over the place. I don't think of it as some psychological problem. The big thumb or something.
Hey, Mac, you turned into a thumb.
Oh, that was awesome.
There you go. Yeah, something that's covering the camera.
Oh,
there, if you want to do it. Yeah.
Well,
If you make a noise, suddenly there you go. Now you're looking good.
Okay.
So,
go
ahead.
Do you want me to jump? I've got it easier because I write short story. And it's pretty hard to get blocked on a short story when it's like 4 pages, but where I kind of, I just lose the momentum, just kind of lose the push to write some more stories. And I think unlike, say, novelists, there are all sorts of little calls for submissions out there in the world, little contests and little literary magazines. And, we're looking for a 1,200 word short story about X. And that becomes a really good kind of, it breaks the spell. And so that might be fun to write. But, there are not a lot of those, send me your novel, we're having a little contest next week. Sure. So I've got it, easier in that sense. It just, And I guess, and maybe I kind of hinted at that when we talked about the earlier question. I get really down on the publishing process and the marketing process. And I still am. I'm in a kind of a slump on that. And on behalf of all of us, which was really the hidden message behind the literally multi-million-dollar contracts, because some celebrity has done some boneheaded thing and writes about it. So I find that uphill push, even tough writing short stories. And I think that would be magnified in terms of the amount of time and energy and effort and blood and sweat that novelists put into their work on quite frankly, sometimes unlikelihood that it will really hit what it deserves. So that's, I don't know, maybe a structural block and maybe kind of an overarching thing I have to work through all the time.
Sure.
Well,
so I also have to work on keeping my thumb off the camera. I guess that's technology.
Michael
I don't even
also,
know where the little hole is. There it is. Okay.
Michael also mentioned being a pantser. I am too, and I have written short stories. I find short form much more difficult. You've got a lot more room in a novel, but everything you say is true, Mac. I think for the novelist, the pantsing thing adds a whole extra dimension of potential for getting stuck in a story. But it's just, that's our process. That's how we work. And that's why your character's so important. Because if you're a pantser, it's character driven. Fuck plot. Plot isn't even in the picture. The characters are the plot. They're making it as they go.
Yeah.
So we get stuck. That's why I always look to characters first.
Interesting.
And I love short stories. I generally prefer to read them and write them. But I have, 3 novels, I think, out. It's more of a challenge. I have far more novels started and stopped at some location on my computer than I have finished, because sometimes they just don't work, and that's kind of the curse of the pantser. It's like, oh, I got this great line, and then you go, oh, well, that was about a chapter, so we'll come back to that another time, whatever. But I think I was starting to say before with the kind of inter-story blocks, I just don't feel them as blocks. You just kind of work. I usually go for a drive. I do some of my best work when I'm driving, or I'll read, somebody that inspires me, or watch something, and it can be just catching some little bit in a movie that goes, oh, that's, that just gave me an idea,
Sure.
Rarely in the middle do I get stuck. It's almost always at the beginning, just getting it going. And I think a lot of, I think Bill Sword made the point, a lot of like beginning writers or people that, everybody's a writer, right? Everybody's going to write a book, but 1% of us actually write a book. But I think a lot of people, that's just an easy way for them to, start. I got writer's block. I just have writer's block. They don't even know what it is. It's just a great excuse for I'm not sitting in the seat writing something. So
it took me a really long time to learn that an idea isn't a story.
But you never know which ones are, right? So a lot of, that's why it doesn't bother me to have 20 stories that might never get written, that I've written 1 or 2 or 3 chapters of. It doesn't bother me that I have a set of notes in my phone that are longer than anything I'll ever get to, of a piece of dialogue or an idea for a story or whatever. It's just, it's a well to pull from. When I do want to write something, whether it's a short story or something, oh, I remember this piece of whatever. Sometimes I'll just scroll through the notes and, okay, that's going to get me going. I know not every idea is going to work, right? And hopefully I learned something from the chapter or 2 that I wrote to take forward, whether it's how I wrote a piece of dialogue or whatever, something in the craft. And then it's fine to sit there. But, maybe my kids will put it together in my legacy, someday. These are all the half stories written by Michael Kozlowski. You'll love them. Finish them. It could be like a color by numbers thing. Finish it at your own.
The choose your own adventure, the Michael Kozlowski story. I think there's, it's funny. I was doing a local author was doing a book launch here and asked me to host it. Right. So I got to do a live version basically of this show. It was super fun. It was great. Los Feliz, which is basically Hollywood, the kind of trendy part. The super rich people in Hollywood go to Beverly Hills. When you're making your way up, you go to Los Feliz. And then the in between is everyone else, right? And so we get done it there. And I love it when this happens. But it's, he was talking about, one of the stories ended up being two stories that he abandoned that ended up coming together. So sometimes those things you work on, it ended up going nowhere, but that idea feeds in,
right.
to what you're
and that
doing.
might show up later somewhere, even
right.
My first quick aside, my first really piece of published work was a novella that started as a novel. And, I probably wrote 4 or 5 chapters of it and got halfway through and went, I have no idea where this is going. But there was some great stuff in the first 3. I'm like, okay, well, we'll just take out this other garbage and start from this spot that was really good. And yeah, it was the first thing that got published. So
sure,
they can carry on.
That works out. Yeah.
Well, everything, the story is the boss, as Alfred Bester used to say. Every idea or everything you write has a story dictates its own length. You can't decide it's going to be a certain length until it's done. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of padding, or you're skipping stuff. And I know Bill does, and I guess you guys do too. I envy people or writers who find short fiction as easy as novels, although Mike didn't mention novels. You're strictly short story, I think. But
I'm novels and
sorry,
short
not
stories. Yeah,
not
Mac,
Mike.
I think is
Mac. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some of you can do both, and I envy that. I find long form much easier in a way.
They both certainly have their challenges. I struggle sometimes just getting enough of that filler in there, making it a novel, because I'm a very linear storyteller. So I find that I have to go back and, rather than kill my darlings, I'm usually, birthing more because I haven't described the sunset or whatever,
Right.
And then in a short story, the challenge there is always to get the point across in, the 5,000 words they're going to give you, or the 3,000 words, or whatever that space is.
Sure. I do want to get us though, because then just for time's sake here, there's the aspect of what is writer's block. And I think perhaps more importantly, there's the, how do you get out of it? Right. So if there's, writers tuning in and they're like, I've hit this block, regardless of what it is, maybe, if it's, you had a death in the family, you got to go deal. You're more important than your writing. Go deal with that. But the other aspects we talked about, intra-story block, like just general block, whatever it might be, that's preventing you from being able to continue on in your writing career. How do you get past that? So maybe then, Mac, you want to take us from there?
Yeah. I think I kind of hinted at that. I'll start searching the internet and ask around. Is there a magazine that's asking for a short story on a theme, or some idea there, and that'll kind of force me to sit down and write a story. And I'll usually send it in, and most of the time that's the last I ever hear of it. But it will have gotten me off that sense of block. So
sure.
I've got as I said, I've got the easy answer, because they're out there all the time.
Well, that's actually a great answer. I had on James Grady, who wrote the book 6 Days of the Condor, which became the movie 3 Days of the Condor back in the 70s with
which
Robert Redford.
I watched the other night, and it is terrific.
Awesome.
Redford,
thank you.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. And James, a super great guy, and he gave a couple examples, and I'll try to include them on the individual video here when we talk about this. But one of them was he had an old poet that was his teacher back in high school, Richard Hugo. And his idea was you have writer's block, you pick a color, you go outside, whatever that color is, it's red. You go outside, you find the first red car. That red car, you find the first 2 letters of the license plate. That is going to be the number of the numbers. That's going to be the number of stanzas you're going to write.
Oh.
And then the next 2 numbers, that's going to be the words you're going to write each stanza. And you're going to write a poem based on that. And James, he adapted that for fiction. And let's see, do I have it written down? I do. So for fiction, he said, what's your favorite number? Go pick up a newspaper. If you live in a place that still has physical newspapers, you find that newspaper. You go to page 9, whatever your favorite number is. Page 9, the bottom left story, bottom right story. You pick that story and you write a story fictionalizing whatever they're talking there. And what he found when he did it for his old, professor, Richard Hugo, and what he's told it to people is the idea is you get out of your headspace and you just start writing something.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. And so it's you don't realize that half the time it is just you're in your way. I think a lot of times, right? And I'm very much into the fact that, and a lot of my writing is described as literary. There's a lot of satirical aspects and things of it, but all of it, I bleed for, right? I believe everything I write, I believe is art, and whatever genre you want to put it into, I'm going to bleed for it. There's going to be some aspect has some like emotional anguish to me. I'm giving myself, I'm bleeding something for whoever's reading that, or maybe just myself in the production of it. I think the other aspect is you can hit a block because that's a painful process to do. And you have to at some point realize that even like this show, right? It feels live, but it's not. Right? We can edit this down the line, right? So I can release this to everyone on here and we can go, oh, you know what? I wasn't comfortable with how that came out or whatever. I can edit it. Your writing is eminently that way. But you have to get past that embarrassment. You have to get past that potential for humiliation. You have to let the lunch tray spill all over you. And face that again, right? And like you're in the middle of the gym, everyone's laughing at you, you're humiliated. You have to face that again, brave enough to do it, knowing that, hey, I can censor this, I can change it, I can decide how much I bleed, right? I always say bleed, but don't give up the ghost. Like I always get to decide like where that point is, but you can't do that if you're guarding yourself at all times. You have to be willing to give it up to a degree. You have to be willing to hurt, to a degree, if that's what type of writing, you're doing. And that can be hard, but it can be really rewarding.
So Bill, here's a live television kind of a thing. What stimulates the thought for a short story writer? Well, I've always wanted to write a story about, and I've always had the title called The Rope of Shame. And we all had a rope of shame around 7th grade in junior high school. Remember the rope that was hung from the highest rafter in the gym? And no human being could climb to the top, And the gym teacher made us try. And we'd get up there, we're dangling like worms on a line. Forget thrown lunch trays. The rope of shame. It's my most consistent nightmare. I may have to write the story, The Rope of Shame, the universal.
I love it. What a metaphor.
Universal shame. Thanks, Bill. You've stimulated me.
He said, ejaculated.
He said abruptly. He shouted enthusiastically.
Awesome.
He interrupted rudely.
Right. So what are some other just techniques maybe that the panels kind of come up here when you're stuck? It can be small or little.
I'm oh sorry, Michael. Go on.
I'd
Go ahead.
preface, I guess, with I think there's two types of writing block. Sort of that I got to get through the story. I'm stuck in the middle somewhere, or stuck starting it. And then there's what's brought on more just from outside stuff. And Dario had mentioned early in his very eloquent dissertation on writer's block. It was, traumatic sort of, I got stress at work, my marriage is whatever, blah, blah, blah. So big proponent. It's a therapy, whether it's a phone call a month type of thing. I think everybody should do that, whether you feel like you need it or not, because sometimes you just need to talk to somebody that, you don't even know you need to talk to somebody. So that gets you past some of that sort of stuff. I think for our conversation more is the kind of inner story. I'm stuck on a plot. I'm stuck on what this character is going to do. I don't know how this is going to end. And for me, it's either inspiration, usually from another story, from somebody else's work. So that's when I'll take advantage of that downtime and, okay, I'm going to catch up on my to be read pile or whatever. Usually something in there will spur me, through to the next, it's all the hero's journey in the end, sort of. So, you'll probably see something in what you're reading, that inspires wherever you're at. Other than that, I said, my best work driving, just my maps is set to default to avoid highways. So unless I have to be somewhere at a certain time, I never take the highway. I'll take a 4-hour route for a 2-hour trip because I get to see stuff I didn't see. And, I spend some great time working and writing and just, otherwise it's all concrete and cars, that's not very inspiring. I've seen that a million times. So take the long road, less traveled, and it gives you a lot of time to think. You're just down a 2-lane or whatever, and you can usually work through those problems or see something that inspires the next story. And I guess lastly, I'd say people will be stuck on an idea, right? I said I have way more stories not finished than finished. And I think people I have to do this. I have to get through it. And sometimes you just got to say, okay, that idea is dead. Maybe it comes back later. Let's move on to something else.
Yeah. No, I think that's all really wise. I love the point too. Well, for one, I want to make sure I acknowledge it. That point of sometimes it's a dead idea, at least for now, right? Maybe it comes back. Maybe it merges with something else you come up with later.
For sure.
The novel I just finished that I've been working on for 13 plus years, Pirates of Appalachia, I just finished, and that was one of the aspects of that was a dead idea that came and worked into that whole mess. So I do think you need to know when is it time to call it. When is it time to kind of move on, and maybe that'll come back to you. It's when you love something, let it go.
Right. The wise words of Kenny Rogers: "Know when to hold
free.
No one to hold them.
Yeah, exactly. Right. There's that aspect. I think that's very wise, and you need to know that. The other aspect I love because it reminded me. I used to commute, right? Because I'm LA, right? If you've lived here, you commuted at some point. And if not, then I judge you when I don't know what you're doing with your life, because everyone here should be commuting at some point. But that drive, that getting your mind off of it, right? Because we go into autopilot, especially when you know where you're going. I guess that subconscious working for you. And I think it was an old Einstein quote, but it was something like, you can't solve a problem on the level of consciousness that created it. And I might be butchering that a little bit, but it's kind of that if you're consciously thinking about something, I wrote it like I'm sitting at this desk writing it. Well, a lot of times we get blocked because we have a problem. And you're not going to solve that problem sitting at that desk, because that's where you created it.
Right.
And getting out of that conscious space for a drive, getting out, especially off the highway to where you can kind of get out and see other things. I'm a big proponent. I love riding my bike. I love actually riding for 4 hours. And then I'll kind of I'll have some things that I'm a little stumped on. And I'll kind of leave them and go off. And then when I ride my bike, I hit that pain where I'm exercise, that pain actually like absolves me of that thought. And then suddenly I'm coming home, I'm coming down the mountain, and I'm just like, oh, I suddenly have all these great ideas. They're just teeming, and a lot of times it's wording, because I like to be very poetic. So a lot of times it's that wording. How do I get that exactly perfect? It comes. So showers, I think, work out really well.
Showers. Oh my God, what is it about showers?
Right.
They're like that's supernatural. Yeah. Mine is for Mike it's driving, for you it's biking, walking for me. Same thing. Showers are just somewhere else.
Showers for everybody. Everybody can be inspired in the shower.
It's unreal. I want to add one more thing I thought of about possible causes for writer's block. I don't know about you guys, but I've always found writing extremely hard. 9 out of 10 writing sessions are hell for me. Occasionally I'll have a great one, but generally I find it extremely hard work. And I want to add, as a possible cause of block, just not wanting to do the fucking work.
Yeah.
And you'd rather do something else. For me, when I'm actually getting writing done, and the only way I've ever been able to complete novels, get stories finished, is when I work daily at the same time every day, and it's all the time. I don't give myself time off from it. I think there's a lot to be said for habits and a work ethic.
Sure.
Notwithstanding what Bill said about reinforcing the block by doing the thing that you associate with being blocked.
Right.
But I think
sometimes you have to lay brick, right?
Sorry?
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to lay brick, right? You're going to make a fence.
Exactly.
Like, you may not want to get out there, but you're going to have to lay the brick. You have to get out and just do it.
And maybe another thing there is, something that's worked for me and other writers I know sometimes is not writing in order. If you're having trouble with the current scene or chapter, if you have easier for outliners than us pantsers.
Because I have such a problem doing that. Right. I know where you're going, but man, I have such
go
a hard
write
time.
Another scene is kind of hard if you're a pantser. But there's no reason one has to write in a sequence. I usually know my ending, although it may change. But I've got my opening scenes, probably a couple of them, couple of waypoints and an ending. So maybe you can hit one of those,
Yeah. Yeah, I'll usually write something else. It works better for me. If I'm stuck, just go play with something else. I always have 2 or 3 or 4 or 20 stories going. So, I can pick something just, I got a page done. But I do agree on the routine. I write much better when I kind of, okay, I'm going to come home, I'm going to, do whatever. Even to the point of, the habits, like, I'm going to take a shower, then I'm going to make a cup of tea, then I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write, just that sort of get myself in the writer's mood. Sure.
Well, and not to corporatize it necessarily, because you're an engineer. This is shameful, but I'm a director for a quality regulatory department, right? Like there's the aspect they call deep work. And that's usually what you hit when you've been working on something for a period. So I think there is also the getting there if you get to the office, and we don't like to think of writing this way because I'm very artistic about it, clearly, but hit the office at the same time, work, you take your lunch. The deep work usually doesn't actually start until you've been doing it for 3-4 hours.
Right.
And it's that last 2 hours that end up being golden. There you feel really great about it. That first 4 hours still might actually be good stuff, but it's harder. Yeah. And you feel it. You feel the labor of it. And then you hit that deep work where your brain and everything is synced, and you have to get there. And sometimes you have to get there the hard way. You have to,
I was
brick. You had to
I was struck by Dario's comment that, it doesn't, want to write, right? There's days where it's so much work to write. and I won't say I never feel that, but fortunately, it's rare for me. When I write, I enjoy it, and it's, I don't know, it's kind of mood setting. I might not get anything worth writing done, but I enjoy the session. I'll put on, a vinyl typically, I'll make a drink or have a cup of tea or whatever. I like to imbibe in cannabis. So, I get in a little mindset.
I was just about to say that because we've talked before. I'm like, you light a joint. Like there's something.
For sure.
Like,
for sure. And it's just, and it's just the whole, thing, right? And the cats come in, I'm having the dogs are under my feet, and, it's, they're at the door now. But it's just, I just enjoy being in the moment, regardless of the, what I produce, and when I when I produce something good, then awesome.
Right.
You guys are so marvelously disciplined. I'm kind of
Bill,
haphazard.
Mac, you're almost off the screen. It's almost just glasses. You're back. There you go.
Am I back? I'm slipping down on this comfortable chair.
That lazy boy's eating you alive.
I'm alive. When I was, most of the stories in my short fiction, I went the whole period. I it wasn't a muse, but I'd get these ideas at 2 or 3 in the morning, and it drove my much suffering wife crazy because and we had this kind of little anteroom off the bedroom, and she'd hear me grumble, then she'd hear me, clicking away. But I found I could really hit that little zone, for 2 or 3 hours. Yeah. And that went on for about a year, about the year that I was, I guess, deep diving or deep working, Bill, to use your phrase, on my collection. That was when it really got produced. Interesting. Mm-hmm. Somewhat haphazardly, but just I'd wake up.
Sure.
There you go. I don't know, pretty nutty.
Inspiration strikes.
Right. Whatever works.
Well, yeah, I tend to think of it, to go back to that Einstein quote a little, as the level of consciousness. I tend to think of conscious versus subconscious. And I want the subconscious because it's way smarter, right? Everyone knows scientifically subconscious is way quicker. It's way smarter. I want my writing to be done there. So there's the laying the brick, the blocking and tackling, the getting stuff out, like getting, to use a sculpting metaphor, which is how I tend to think of the writing process. I need to get the clay there. I need to get it somewhat formed. And then I want to go to bed. I want to go for a bike ride. I want to take a shower. I want something that is still in my head, but I want to let my subconscious mind do it and let my conscious mind catch up to it. The one that I think about a bit is that as I was working on Pirates, there's basically 4 pillars. There's almost 4 novels that make up this epic absurdist satire I've been working on. One of them literally never made any sense to me, and I kept thinking, this is bullshit. This is like I'm a crazy person. Like I'm going way too far. This one's nutty. But I trusted myself. I had faith in myself that I know there's a part of me that knows why that's happening. Mm-hmm. I don't know why I need to sit and write these 70,000 words for this. And trust myself that this happens. And I swear if it ends up being 70,000, I'm at word 65,000, and it finally hit. Mm. And I was like, oh, I know exactly why this was so vital to the story and why crazy. It couldn't exist without it.
Such a great feeling, right? Like I had that happen a lot in my fiction, where it's just, whether it's just a throwaway line or some action that the character did that you're like, I don't know, I'm just filling up space kind of. Yeah. And then subconscious at work, and 4 chapters later you're like, oh my God, that's why he did it. Like it surprised myself.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right.
The subconscious knows exactly what it's doing. I think a lot of writing problems are in the transcription. And I think that's one of the reasons, and Stephen King talks about this in his little book, one of the reasons why, for me anyway, same time, same place daily works really well, because it facilitates that dialogue and makes that channel of communication between the conscious and the subconscious, the listening, much easier. But I think the subconscious knows exactly what it's doing. I've had the experiences you guys are talking about, and often realize that I've consciously interpreted some material wrong. Like once I got two characters transposed, I couldn't figure out why the story felt so weird. And I realized that literally each character was saying what the other should be saying and taking the role of the other.
Sure.
The material was right. I was transcribing it wrong. And once I realized that, it was fine.
Sure.
I know it sounds a little surreal, but you guys get it.
No, I get it.
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And to break that, I think the counterpoint is, try to be consistent, but especially since most writers have day jobs, right? Or they're retired, right? Mac, like you're like saying like, oh, my wife's so happy. I was a lawyer all these years and we got to eat,
Yeah.
And the flip side is sometimes breaking the routine can get you out of the rut. So if every day you write at your computer at 6 a.m. and you hit that rut, sometimes you don't need to do that permanently, but take your phone out, go on a nature walk, go sit down next to the creek. Or you guys in Michigan or South Carolina have beautiful scenery. In LA here, I can just go walk out to our reservoir and see whatever random reservoir creatures are out there, right? But go out, like, break the routine, break the timing, break the, I think really importantly, sometimes breaking the method. Sometimes I like to write I used to write at the bar here, just on the other side. And then I have a desk that's just kind of just there. It rises and falls or whatever. And I 90% of my writing there. But if I hit some deadlock, then I'll take my phone. I'll go pick my son up early. I need to pick him up from school. I'll go early, like an hour, and I'll write on my phone. Or I'll take paper. Sometimes paper, like we don't like it. Like I used to always write on paper. I stopped because like it's just very inefficient. You have to transcribe it, or there is software, but I write like a doctor, so no software is ever going to figure out whatever the hell it is I'm putting on there. But sometimes that difference in timing, form, methodology can get you out of whatever rut you're in. A lot of times I think it's just a rut. You need to try to find your way out. And my last bow on this,
Yeah, if I could jump in, because I've kind of portrayed my stuff so haphazardly, but I thinking about it quite a few times when I was really stuck. I've got kind of a little Zen place I go. It's a place for lunch. It's out on a dock along a creek, and it's gorgeous and quiet. And that has broken the ice jam for me, actually quite a few times as I think about it. So all of you talking about having some place can be a kind of discipline too. So I'd have to add that to my short list.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for that. And then my bow of it, and then I'll open it up to you guys, is that I had on S.J. Roseanne. It's spelled Rozan. Bestsellers and tons of crime fiction and mysteries and things. And she mentioned this on an episode we just recorded that will probably maybe out before this and maybe out a little later than this by the time it comes out. But she had really great advice to this, and it was based on a band leader. So this is kind of third hand. If you listen to the episode, she'll give the discreet advice on it, and the person will get their proper praise for it. But it was a band leader that said, as he hired new people, he used to always say, when you get lost, and I know you will, because you're going to think about the girl you're going to go on a date with, or you're going to think about, what happened that day, or your parents, whatever it is, find the melody. And she took that for her writing, which was find the reason she wrote that piece originally. And it was, what's the big idea? So like with Pirates, it took me a long time, and I realized, it's a treatise on tribalism. So it's an epic, absurd satire. There's all kinds of things, but at the end of the day, it's all about tribalism, and the dangers, and, you know, the pitfalls of it. So you find that melody, find the reason you initially started writing that. And if you have that issue, whatever it is, when you get that melody, it'll actually get you past it, because it'll find its way. And when she said that, I was like, oh, it's such a beautiful way to think of it. Is that, yeah, it's the melody, you think music. And I know, Mike, actually, you have the you know, I know it was a cover band when we talked, but I think you've started on your own music and things now. But
yeah, doing a little bit of my own original stuff now.
yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of okay, sometimes you get off tune, but you know, find the melody back. And writing, it's a little harder to think what the melody is, but the melody is the big concept. The theme, yeah.
Yeah, that's tremendous advice. That's a really, really good one.
Awesome. So anyone else before we move on and we hit the last subject for tonight?
I think I'm good. Beat that horse.
That horse is dead. We beat it. I kicked it a few times while it was down, because yeah, I want to know. I want the other horses to know what kind of man I am. Round 3, pop culture. Star Trek versus Star Wars. Who you got? Let's start with you, Matt.
All right, that's you now know me as a short story writer, so this will not be surprising. It's got to be Star Trek. It's episodic, short, discrete, standalone stories. You know, kind of like in the tradition of the Twilight Zone, and one of my favorite shows. So hands down, I like Star Trek. That said, hands down for the score on Star Wars. But I have to confess, I love the music. I'm so lost on Star Wars. I've never figured out who's the good guy, the bad guy. You know, it's like picking up a novel in the middle. I mean, it kind of threw me for a loop. So totally biased. Star Trek all the way. Amen.
All right. Amen. Mike, let's go to you.
All right. Well, I would also go with Star Trek. I just think from a writing perspective, it's more diverse. You know, you've got the episodes, you've got, you know, the different locations, right? Different, and it's more a morality tale. You know, how do you interact with people? Star Trek's, you know, or Star Wars rather, is really just your, you know, basic hero's journey. You know, you know, you could probably put you know, a number of names over those characters, and you know, it's a movie you've seen, right? So, I just think the diversity of Star Trek is the winner for me. You know, especially as a writer.
All right, Dario, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm on the same page now. I'll preface this by saying that I don't do a lot of visual media, and I've not seen most of the recent or later Star Wars movies, or any current Star Trek, if there even is any current. I'm not a big watcher, but Star Trek, definitely. I suspect it's a demographic thing. I think Star Wars is more formulaic. Call it hero's journey, call it, you know, just kind of more generic. And I suspect that it's aimed at 1, fans, and 2, adolescents. Whereas Star Trek, I think, is aimed at 1, fans, 2, a more grown-up audience. But I'm very behind on this, and I may be wrong, but as far as score goes as well, yes, on John Williams, but God, the first series Star Trek music with the what's the name of that wonderful instrument? Yeah, it's the theremin music. Oh my God. You know, the thing that goes,
So
All right. I'll give you
I
that.
love this, actually. I'll be the voice of dissent for
All right.
this. And part of the reason I'm going to be the voice of dissent is that my dad loves Star Trek, loved it when I was a kid. Aerospace engineer, Air Force pilot, Air Force captain, pilot to this day. Our pilot sign, though, I will give him credit for this because I'm the I need to confirm. I think I'm the 7th William, since there was a William Hennessy in Ireland, and that has turned into William Hincy at some point over time. My son would be the 8th. Our call sign is Whiskey Hotel. So, amen, Dad. Whiskey Hotel, maybe the best call sign like ever for a pilot. So, like, feeling good, thank you for the name. But he loved Star Trek. He was very busy. He was commuting. I alluded to earlier, right? Everyone around here commutes. He commuted crazy lengths. So when I was younger, I didn't get a lot of time to spend with him. But if there's a new Star Trek movie, we were going to watch that. So we watched Wrath of Khan. We watched whatever it is. And they were awesome. But also they were my dad's movies. So, of course, I like Star Wars more. And I think Dario, that's a really fair point, was that Star Trek was a little more adult.
Yeah. Star
Wars was a little bit more kid and teenager. Like, it's that, especially for a young man, it's that more I need to, like, I'm going to go to war. I'm going to go do this thing, But if we break this down a little, I wonder if I can change some minds here. So if we just go technology, right? So technology, Star Wars, you get lightsabers. So you get sword battles, right? You get King Arthur style sword battles to go with the drama. Or I get a phaser and I'm going to set it to stun.
But you can also
that awesome.
beam yourself wherever you want to go.
Yeah. William.
You don't have to bother with those clunky spaceships. You just beam yourself.
Your plot contrivance is what I hear with
Bill,
that.
you go into a place as big as your shower and you get beamed anywhere in the universe. Come on. How can you beat that?
I'm just going to say it. Lucas had no idea what he was doing when he started. You had brothers and sisters kissing. He didn't know where he was going.
Yeah.
That was pure panzer. Pure panzer.
I still have no idea. I have no clue ever, and have no interest in putting that wreckage together. None.
Right.
Well, then the trilogies I also feel like the trilogies are just repetitive also, right? Looks like it's the same story every 3 movies,
For sure. I think there's I think that's an interesting question to take this, is that what's in better shape now? Because there is, like, Star Wars hasn't released anything good since my sons have been born.
Yeah.
And I like the Mandalorian.
Mandalorian.
Tentatively.
Right.
I liked it at first. I was
into it, but again. I don't think they know where that's going either. Like, they're like,
they don't.
People are watching. What's going on?
We have to go. We have to do whatever's happening.
Right. I don't think Star Trek's really. I don't know how poised they are for moving on, and maybe that's fine.
Who's in better shape now?
Point, just do something else, right? Like, I don't need another Star Trek or another Star Wars. Like, just give me a new story. There's plenty out there.
Well, that's the hard part, and that's the sad part, because what I like to do with the show is have some pop culture and just that we discuss, right? And from that writing perspective. So thank you, Mike, for kind of bringing it back to that part of it, is that you can discuss it just from the I'm happy or unhappy. And that's what everyone does. I'm happy, unhappy, and that's all our perspective. But if you look at it from the writing perspective, I made a joke about just score, right? But that's part of the writing of a movie. So the score kind of counts for you. There's also, I think, if you're talking sci-fi, there's the tech part of it. And lightsabers are pretty cool.
Absolutely.
Def-
And I used to play the Imperial March whenever I'd walk into a meeting. You know, just for fun. It really got people's attention. But
Although, as you probably know, the original flip phone cell phones really were directly inspired by Star Wars.
Star
No,
Trek.
Star
right?
Trek.
Star Trek, sorry,
Yeah.
yes, thank you. Star Trek Communicator.
I think, talking sci-fi too, I think, and to Dario's point about the demographic, if you're a sci-fi guy, right? If you're a Bradbury fan, if you're a Twilight Zone guy,
Oh,
you're
yeah.
going to gravitate to Star Trek for sure, because
For
it's
sure.
it's that genre more. If you're, a sword and sorcery guy, a Dungeons and Dragons kind of kid, which I was not so much, you're going to go Star Wars.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think that there's also if you're serialized, Star Trek was way more successful television.
Sure, yeah.
And then Star Wars was more successful with the movies, with the big extravaganza, which was maybe where the hero's journey and the that plays off a little bit more, because Star Trek definitely has I'm going to take a hypothetical and we're going to explore that, like the Twilight Zone. Here's
Right,
my
yeah.
hypothetical. We're going to explore this, and it's going to be fun. Star Wars hasn't bridged that, and Star Trek's never really, outside of maybe. So actually, maybe this would be an interesting place to take this, because this is maybe where Star Trek has bridged that gap, that movie gap. Wrath of Khan, right? So when I say, hey,
Yeah, everybody loves Wrath of Khan.
Wrath of Khan's awesome. It's like, that's an extravaganza. Like that was
that
great.
was the peak of Star Trek moviedom. Yes, for sure.
Right. So peak wise, I think, and feel free to disagree, I think the peaks are, at least cinematically, Wrath of Khan, Empire Strikes Back.
Yes, I agree completely.
Yeah. So which one had the better peak?
Probably Empire Strikes Back. They're both really good, but just for sure, sheer shock value and storytelling, probably Empire Strikes Back.
Dario,
Well,
Matt?
I think one of the advantages Star Wars had too is just that we'd never seen anything like it.
Just
And
the effects, right?
certainly the first movie, but even Wrath of Khan. I mean, the sheer spectacle and epic quality of the visuals was nothing we'd ever seen.
Right.
But yeah, Wrath of Khan, yeah.
Well,
both-
Wrath of Khan also
both
has the
choices.
It's hard,
And
it's
I
hard not to
feel it
love
now.
Ricardo Montalban too. I mean, come on.
yeah, exactly. So he's a sexy man, and he
Look, I
does
was
a great
he
job.
was jacked in that movie too. What the hell?
I think there's.
Go ahead, Bill. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Byron.
No, I mean, as someone who was I was pretty well involved with the science fiction scene for a couple of decades. I went to a lot of conventions. All my friends were in science fiction. I talked at conventions. I was on panels, and I wrote some science fiction. I'm such a purist, and it's unfortunate that most of the good science fiction never makes it to the screen because it's too intelligent. It's too high concept. It's too clever. And it doesn't. To me, the best science fiction movies, and there aren't many, actually don't have much visual flash, because I want the content, I want the concept, I want the deep ideas. So I'm kind of biased against both of them, but yeah, of going back to the question, always Star Trek.
Well, and
I gotta take 1 second, Bill. I gotta let my dog out here. Sorry.
Oh yeah.
I'm the only one here. When she's up, she's gotta go.
Okay. But no, I think that's fair, Dario. Is that when you look at it, like Star Trek has the concepts, right? Like it's very much like Twilight Zone. Like you can take a hypothetical and follow it. And Star Wars never did that. Well, it hasn't yet.
No,
It could. It could be a really interesting way to like actually take it, but I doubt they bother because it's just the explosions, or whatever. But yeah, I wonder. And we'll see. Mike's back with us here.
Sorry.
So we had highest peak, and I think we all agreed that it's either Wrath of Khan or Empire Strikes Back, one of the original trilogy. No one thinks anything besides Star Wars is better than the original trilogy. Like anyone with sense does not think that's that.
None of it. Not the ones I've seen anyway.
I'm sticking with my Star Trek. I don't think I've seen some of those other ones. Sorry.
Oh, fair enough. I wonder then, lowest valley. So, lowest valley, like which one has descended the worst, right? So we had Star Trek.
I think it's going to be a consensus on Star Wars' lowest valley, but Star Trek's tougher to think of. So I'm gonna for Star Wars, Jar Jar Binks. Done. That's it. For Star Trek,
Me the Jar Jar Binks.
I mean, I think everybody would just think, yep, okay, case closed on Star Wars. For Star Trek's lowest valley, man, Scott Bakula was he in the Star Trek version. Scott Bakula.
He was Enterprise,
Yeah, I'll go with that.
Yeah, well, I did hear. I didn't watch it, but I did hear that there was a Klingon episode where it was like a musical episode.
Probably sounds right. I didn't watch. Yeah. I did not watch that series either. So
yeah. It's getting hard.
I'm sorry. What was your question? I'm not sure I got it right.
What was the lowest valley?
The lowest valley. Oh, okay. Tribbles.
I think tribbles are great, though. I was gonna say tribbles.
They are, but they're
people
also...
just love them. They're so cute. Like nobody's like, "Oh, Jar Jar Binks is cute," but like tribbles are cute.
They're cute and painful.
What is the lowest valley? It's Tribble. But
How about high points? I got to say 7 of 9.
Oh, you like 7 of 9? Okay.
Oh my God, I love 7 of 9. And the Borg Queen was pretty hot too. Memorable in a way that Princess Leia never was.
Oh man! The bikini.
You're not on the right generation, Daria.
The bikini.
Princess Leia is
iconic.
Memorable up here. Yeah.
Oh, you guys, seriously? This is making me think of the Friends episode where
Rachel wore the costume. I remember that.
Iconic. You can't. Yeah, that's kind of indisputable.
I love that.
Now we're talking.
You're talking to the wrong generation.
There's a whole subgenre of porn based on that. Jeez.
I know. It's mind-boggling.
It's not. If you were born around that time, it's not mind-boggling. Like you understand.
I was probably too old to really get that. Yeah.
Yeah, I missed that boat.
Man, I was just out at Disney and we almost bought one of those head things. I'm just.
The mind can only wander here.
Right. So I wonder then, lastly, which franchise is in the better shape? Just as we stand today, because there's you've had Star Wars with the botched sequel trilogy that people liked at first and then kept losing money. Star Trek that has been trying to produce TV shows over and over and it's kind of fallen into relevance.
Like I was saying before, I think they're both just they should just both, hang it up. Like it's been enough. I think if you're from a purely capitalistic sort of view, Star Wars probably has the better opportunity to keep making money. They'll put stuff out and people will keep watching it. Star Trek probably doesn't have quite the loyal fan base. Plus, probably most of their fan base is older. I mean, 15 years or so odd generational
yeah.
difference, right? I think from
Sure.
Star Trek to Star Wars. So,
Yeah.
so from a capitalistic point, Star Wars, but I think they should both just call it a day.
Yeah, I
Well,
would
the
agree with that.
interesting thing-
I think they're on vapors, you know? I mean, that's
The interesting thing about Star Trek is that each different incarnation has very different, people have very different feelings about it. I mean, I really liked the Voyager series. A lot of people hated it, and you get different, there's very different loyalties. That never happened with Star Wars, of course. But yeah, I agree. I think they're on vapors. And part of it is because science fiction is everywhere now. It's not ghettoized and segregated in a way it was 2 or 3 decades ago. It's everywhere. It's in everything. Science fictional ideas come into all kinds of mainstream movies and literature now.
Yeah, and your whole Marvel series is science fiction now. Everything's in space. And I mean, it's kind of taken that over and gone beyond.
Yes.
Right. Well, it's ceased to be thought-provoking, right? Like it's all turned into the Star Wars aspect of it. And I was giving the case for Star Wars, and I still love it. And I think there's the action part, I think, is fine. Like, you need a place for young boys to like sword fight and things. But it's lost the conceptually, I'm gonna think about this hypothetical, and that's gonna be the episode. We're gonna just like think about what it would mean to really be socialistic and just turn it into a space opera based on that. Those parts have kind of been lost.
I think any story, any franchise like that, there's, I don't know why we keep recycling. There's a limit. Like 1, 2, whether it's Die Hard movies or Star Wars or I'm trying to think what else, Guardians of the Galaxy, whatever. It's just like we're going to recycle Indiana Jones. It's the same story it's just the same movie, right? So eventually, you become numb to the message. Whether it's an actual message or it's just whatever that formula. At least repackage it with a, I mean, they mostly are, right? They're all the same stories, but give me some different actors and some different, a different location, whatever.
Well, it was like The Mummy was a repackaging of Indiana Jones.
Yeah, and it was great for a couple, right?
It was great for a couple. It was fine,
right? A new character, a new.
Now they don't even bother to try. It's not even like this is The Mummy. It's just here's
I mean,
Indiana Jones at 97.
You say The Mummy to someone my age, and I go back to Boris Karloff in the 1960s. So,
and even to horror, though, like Friday the 13th and the Freddy movies and stuff like that. I mean, Friday the 13th now is just a parody of itself, right? They're just Freddy in space or whatever. But
well, my answer to that is it's because they're contemptible idiots. I have zero respect for Hollywood and its constant, wow, if that was good, let's have more and amp it up. It's just I hate it. I hate
one is good, 20's better. Yeah, just regurgitate
absolutely
over and over.
Yeah, and not to be the defender of Hollywood, because I'm not. But literature did this before Hollywood.
Fair.
Yeah.
Right. It actually, like, literature is actually bleeding edge of what happens with Hollywood, half the time. And there's a lot of books, a lot of the stuff we're writing that I'm trying to be the new Stephen King. And it's like, well, why do you need a new Stephen King? Because you already have Stephen King, I mean, you can write another horror movie, but you got to personalize it. You got to find a reason you're the person to tell that story, or there's a new story to tell versus just.
And there's kind of only so many stories to tell, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, you can make up your things and you have your fiction, but you're telling the same sort of overarching arc of the story. you know.
Sure.
So it's just
You
how
know,
you package it. But
even though I was
to my point, just package it different for me. Stop packaging it the same way and giving me the same movie or the same.
even though I was trashing the Star Wars, for science fiction, I stumbled on something that was so much fun the other night. I mean, I'm mystified usually by my little device to turn on I stumbled on Amazon Prime onto schlock movies from the 50s. Schlock, science fiction. Absolutely the most marvelous collection of junk you've ever seen. And I mean, it was just great. I'm sorry, it was so bad, but
What was
every
it?
bad movie is there. And with all due respect to science fiction, which I love, great science fiction, but it's just fun to romp through that kind of naive innocence of the 50s. It really is called schlock science fiction, and it's probably got 30 or 35 movies on that.
Nice.
If
Oh,
you have a
really?
quiet night one night, it's great fun. And if you have Amazon Prime and you elect to have the movie interrupt with commercials, it's free. I mean, with your
Very
subscription.
good.
Yeah, I have no interest in
I
Amazon.
still love the Godzilla movies. I think
Oh,
they're
yeah.
incomparable. The first Godzilla movies, oh my God, they were so good.
Sorry, Bill. 1 second while I let the dogs back. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and there is the new Godzilla movie, Dario, with Godzilla -1 or something that like they made in Japan for like basically nothing, which
Really?
is 8 million or whatever, nowadays. But that one made a ton of money. And
I haven't
everyone
seen
loves
it.
it because they didn't use a lot of CGI because they didn't have money.
Right.
And it was a very personal story still based on World War II, and everything. And people, I think it's Godzilla -1, and that one.
I've heard that was
Oh,
great.
thank you.
I haven't
Yeah.
watched that yet, and I heard it was amazing.
I haven't watched it yet
Everybody-
either.
Godzilla went. Okay, well, I'll have to check
Yeah,
that one out.
Godzilla -1, which is what and I think that might be not even just for cinematic, but just in general, the future of storytelling may be that parse it down a little, right? Like you can write a book and you have there's no cost for having 1,000 scenes, right? There's no monetary cost to having 1,000 scenes. The cost, though, is that the reader has to follow along all those scenes. And every new scene you set, they have to follow you there. And every time you change the scene, that may be a place where they jump off and you become their do not read pile. So I think as Hollywood's learning with like that Godzilla -1, and probably many other things, is that, you can do that, but it's not the special effects that get people, it's the story, it's character. Get them hooked on that, and then unfold the rest from there. So
I think an example of that is the Marvel versus DC and how well Marvel built their character and their worlds over time. And the DC tried to catch up with, just jamming all your characters into one movie or whatever. It's like, I don't even care about these characters. So.
right. Yeah, we don't even know who they are, right? You're
Yeah.
whatever. So awesome. Anywho, so thanks so much, guys. Anything else? Anyone in the departing thoughts? Anyone would like to share?
This was great fun. Delightful to be
yeah.
with you guys.
Yeah, it was,
Yeah, I really enjoyed it too. Yeah.
Very good. Thanks so much, guys, for coming on. That'll be the end of this episode of Writers Drinking Whiskey Open Bar. I like to say it like a pirate. Very, very pirate centric here, but thanks so much, guys, for coming on. It was a great conversation, and cheers to all of you.
Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in. The show is a labor of fun, and it's truly a reward in its own right. But if you would like to support me or the other amazing authors I have on there, consider picking up a book. Any of the writers we have on here would be a great addition to your bookshelf. Each one is a master storyteller and just a great person to boot. So you'd be doing them and yourself a great favor in picking those up. And while I would never call myself a master, because that would be, as we said in the 90s, conceited, I do have on a pretty good authority from critics and my mom alike that I'm not bad. So if you wouldn't mind picking up one of my books, that would be great as well. I would appreciate it. Thanks again for watching. And thanks to my great panel of guests for coming on and spending this time with us. Cheers.